Hello everybody, again another video tutorial, and in that case I would like to show you the last one from this model. But when I want to say the last one, it's the last one before to use the airbrush. So with this video tutorial, only with these 3 video tutorials, you have everything without loose details from this Mangler Squig. So I hope you have enjoyed watching the first 2 video tutorials and enjoy with this one, because in that case I would like to show you something else, something to add different tones, different colors, different textures, and to try to fix typical mistakes when you are painting something with 2 colors. When I said 2 colors, it's when you want to paint, for example, the belly with a gray or with a white color. So before to start with the belly, I would like to show you the spikes. What happened with the spikes? First, you have to understand this more or less like when you have painted the teeth, okay? More or less the same idea. But in that case, I wanted to bring you something different. In that case, I would like to show you paint that kind of spikes with 2 kind of lights. So the first one, it's in this video tutorial, and the next one I'm going to explain you after the airbrush. So please, before I would like to show you this one, but remember about the spikes, I would like to paint with 2 kind of lights in the same spike. So first, paint as the teeth. So paint everything with lines, dots, like whatever you want. So, but just make information. And the most important part about that is move the light close to the dark lining. So move the light to the bottom. So this is really important. So if you can't move the light to the bottom, then you will have only the light on the top and the shadow close to the dark lining. So this is a mistake, because then you can't define perfectly these kind of spikes. So I recommend you move the light to the center like a cylinder or like a cone, and then move the light to the bottom. So this kind of 2 lights, but then I would like to explain you the light that you should paint on the top, but this light will be after the airbrush. So now just define everything with this kind of dots. So it's like more or less like the teeth. So the idea is represent this with lines, dots, and try to represent something with texture, but never the same like the teeth. So I would like to show you to paint this with texture, just because in this model, a 3D print, to me, it's something that has okay results. So the definition is really nice, but need more information, at least to me, because if I paint just with glazing, everything is smooth, at the end everything will look the same. And I would like to paint with a smooth surface only on the belly, so on the bottom part from this model, so under the tail, under the maybe the legs in your case, and under the mouth, so on the belly. So that areas I would like to paint it with a different texture, a different result, a different finish, it more smooth than the rest of the model, to represent 2 kind of skins. The top of that over this Mangler Squig, like a rough or like a lizard skin, and on the belly more like a human skin, for example, something more delicate. And what do you have to know about that? So the first thing idea I should propose you to understand, it's when you want to paint something like a white color, you have to think about gray colors or desaturated colors. So that means desaturated means with a color close or very close to white, close to black, or with browns. More or less that kind of idea. It's perfect to understand what means a desaturated color. So if you want something saturated, will be closer to the primary colors. So how much close it's to the primary colors, to yellow, cyan, and magenta, more saturated. So if you want to paint with a white belly, okay, never paint with pure white. Why? Because if you want to play with white, you have to play with different kind of grays to give me the idea that you have white color, but never with white. Because if you are painting with white color, pure white color on the belly, you will have the highest lights on the bottom part. So could be weird because maybe you think that you are making a OSL and it's not your idea, or at least it's not my idea in this project. My idea is has the best or the highest light over the model, close to the mouth and close to the goblins, and under him has like a white color, but in that case with different kind of grays. So, and this is what I'm trying to propose you. Play with the grays that I have them, so you can check them on the wet palette. So with this kind of grays, it's perfect to start to have a desaturated color and give me the idea that this is white. So if you are playing with pure white, then maybe you can do it if you know that, and then you play with dark tones or darker colors to blend with the airbrush, just to bring down the light. But if you want to keep the pure white on the belly, then will be weird, because maybe you will have the highest light on the belly, and this is wrong, or at least to me. So, and for sure, if you want to play with pure white, I recommend you play only on the lips, as I'm showing you now, because in that area the angle could look more lighter, and maybe it's at a different angle and it's close to a place where you should paint with highest lights, so close to the mouth. So for that reason, maybe it's on the only place that I recommend you play with pure white, but pure white only with final touches, just that. So don't paint at the beginning with pure white. So I recommend you play with different grays. And then how to get this smooth contrast? Just paint with capibases, as always I explain you, but then remember the tool I give you. So the idea to paint with a 50-50 dilution. So I recommend you play to blend a bit with this dilution, because with 1, 2, maybe 3 brush strokes, you will have very well smooth that area and will be okay, or you have prepared to paint with the airbrush at the end. Just for that. So because as you can see now, so this kind of brush strokes with more water, like 50-50, will be perfect to blend a bit, because then we will blend perfectly with the airbrush. This is just to bring you a different kind of skin on the same model. So this is to propose you that you can play with different kind of skins on the same model. At the beginning could look like weird, but this is something that I would like to represent it with the gradients. If you check the arms or the legs or the rest of the skin on the turquoise or blue part, you will see that every gradient I've painted with stippling, with this kind of dots, just to make the gradient. However, on the belly, I was painting with this kind of smooth gradients, just to bring you two kind of skins, something more delicate and the other one more from a lizard. As for the lips and that kind of volumes that you can find close to the mouth, what happened with this? So at the beginning, when I explained you that you have to deconstruct everything geometrical shapes, you have to think that the lips, the whole lips, it's like a big cylinder. But then inside of that, you can find kind of spheres. So be careful with that, because if you can't define the spheres, maybe it will look just like a cylinder, but this is not a real problem. Then if you want to use the airbrush to blend over some places, for example under that, you can get this volume. So if you couldn't paint it well, don't worry, because then with the airbrush we can fix the volumes. So don't feel stressed about that. Try to represent them, and then if you can't represent them well, paint with the airbrush, going to the bottom, going from the shadows to represent the volumes. And then if you need to blend with a different colors, different nuances, you will get more and more details. But please, on areas like the lips, try to represent it like a easy geometrical shapes. So like a cylinder and then like a tiny spheres. But if in some of them you couldn't represent them well, don't worry, because then with airbrush we can fix it at the same time that we are blending over that, okay? So this is the kind of white color that I propose you that you can use. It's not pure white, it has a bit of green inside, but it's something lighter. So it's on the unique place, just that place I recommend you play with these kind of colors. And if you see, it's just tiny touches. For example, you can find a lot of a lot of different volumes on that area, like spirals, like I don't know, like weird volumes. So it's just that. So try to represent them, and if you can't, don't worry, because then when you blend with airbrush, in the way that I'm going to explain you, I think you will get a better result, or at least something enough to represent that. So don't worry if you can't represent every volume from your model, because the truth is, if you understand the important volumes, will be okay. So you don't have to feel stressed to represent every kind of micro volume, okay? So then, what happened about the belts, wraps, and stuff like that? So I would like to show you something about, or explain you something about the leather. So when you want to paint leather, you have to think if this leather will be older or newer. So in that case, because it's from goblins, I think that something older will be better. But the idea that I would like to translate to you in that video tutorial is that when you have to paint something like that, at the beginning could be like a flat surface, so you have to create a tension on that. So you have to decide one side with light and the other side with a shadow. But at the beginning, it's just like a flat surface. Paint both edges, and in the middle, paint some midtones. This kind of midtones should be with textures. But the texture, in that case, is just thin lines. Just that, something like that. And as for the edging, what happens when you want to paint the edges on a leather? So remember that the leather, the material, it's thicker, for example, than the cotton or silk. So what happens when you want to represent this kind of materials and represent them completely different? So play with the edges. It's one tip I really interesting that I can give you, because the leather is maybe the only material that you can paint with something thicker. But be careful with that, because then maybe I'm going to say that you are painting with highways, so something thicker than should be. So the idea is always paint the edges thinner, but it's true that the silk will be really delicate, and you have to paint the edging really thin, okay? But on the leather, you can paint something thicker. So think about that, because maybe something new to represent or to separate well every material. And it's just paint as you see. So paint over the layer and over again, because I wanted to represent a gradient. And in this kind of texture, if you see some lines from the first layer, you can't see them well, and some of them you can see perfectly. So the idea is play with different nuances with the different layers. If you remove everything with the next layer, and then with the next one you remove again everything, the result will be the base coat and the last layer, the highest layer. So this is a real mistake. It's very common to see this kind of gradients, but the reality is not a gradient, it's just two layers. So the idea is repaint with this kind of stippling or lines the 90% of the previous layer, and then repaint again the 90%. If you don't want to represent the 90, 80% of every layer, okay? And after that, you will get something like this. So with that is, I think, enough for now. So then we will play with inks and maybe the airbrush or maybe not. So, but we have to blend a bit with inks on that areas, okay? And now I would like to show you something that it's a pain in your neck, always. How to paint chains like that. So first, think that you have to paint at 28 millimeters. So will be technically, you have to paint the edges. How you should start? I recommend you paint with a very dark base coat, as always, with a capibase like the first shadow, and then paint every edges, everyone. So, and you will see that in the middle tones or in mid tones, you will have exactly the same color than you can find in the dark linings. So we need to fix that with the next layers. But now the most important is paint every edges. So the most important will be paint the edging. So you have to paint every edges with this contrast, okay? Then you will see how you have the same color in the dark linings and in the middle tones. So then with the next layers, we can play with the 50-50 dilution to blend a bit and reduce or get something higher there. With that, will be okay. So with this, with the first layer, you will see how you have defined everything. And then the next layers will be where? In the edging. Again, so in the edges. So the trick to represent a chain, it's defined well. You have to draw it. If you try to represent it with glazing, without the edges, the edge highlighting, it's very, very important in that case, because it's like a tiny details, everything, it's like a detail. So you don't have a huge place to blend with glazing and stuff like that. So you have to represent like I'm showing you, and then the next layers in the same places, but painting maybe 80%, as you can see now. So some angles, the higher angles or some angles that you want to represent with more light for the angle or something, you have to repaint them again, or the 90% of that area. With this, you will get the result. You will get the material and you have defined perfectly the chain. So if then you want to represent something different, like a gradient with a different color, for example, you want to use orange because you want to represent rust on that area, we can do it with the airbrush. And then if we need, we can reinforce it with the brush. So this is something that I would like to explain you, because if you play like that, if you represent everything technically, then with the airbrush will be super easy to add different gradients, shadows, different colors to create to get different nuances. So a lot of stuff. So the only thing that you have to know about this is keep enough attention to paint the edging as thinner as you can, and paint with 2 or 3 kind of layers. And if some moment, if you feel that you have too much shadow in a place where you have to have light, just play with the dilution like 50-50, just to remove a bit that color, just that. So, and you will get something like you can see on the video. For example, about the ball, the sphere, okay? I've painted with a texture because in that case I wanted to represent something older, and I thought that a texture here will be okay too. But as you see, in that case it's more like a real stippling than, for example, when I was painting the skin. The skin was like a dots, not like random dots, because I was painting where I want it, but in that case on the ball I was painted like a stippling, just that. Okay. So with this kind of tiny lights or tiny dots, like brights, you can define perfectly everything, okay? So now is the moment to start to play with different nuances, different dots, and for that work, I'm going to represent more or less the same as I painted with the green in the previous video tutorial. So tiny circles with my brush with different size. with this kind of violet. Why this kind of violet? Because I was trying with orange and I didn't like it. It was awful. So in my mind, the complementary color will be okay, but on the reality, for my taste, was awful. So I understood that I wanted something like a red in my mind on this model, but after testing, I've discovered that I don't want to use orange. So for that reason, I thought about that. So I want something with red, but maybe orange is wrong. So if I play with another red like I have on the mouth, maybe it will be weird. So maybe I need something with more blue. So for that reason, I've decided to use this kind of violet because it has inside a bit of blue and works perfectly as the red I have on my mind. So and now it's just represent like a line with dots, different size, some of them like a big circles and some of them tiny circles to represent like a line around the model. Just I was painting in one side and then if I like it, I'm going to another one. So I don't recommend you paint both sides at the same moment because maybe at the end you don't like it, you don't like the color, you don't like the size of the dots, you don't like something. So just test in one place and then move to another one. So I would like to add more colors just because I wanted to bring you like a lizard skin or like a chameleon or a crow, a frog skin. So just I was finding information on Google about that and I've discovered that they has a lot of crazy colors on their skin. So after check it, like this color is going from the middle or close to the face to the end of the tail. It's perfect to me, so I move it to the other side. And now, because I wanted to move the attention close to the center of the model and close to the goblins, I decided to add another kind of color. But in that case, if I add more crazy colors, like for example yellow or orange with more yellow will be too much. So I've decided to use a different kind of green. So for this one, you can see that this green is lighter than the other one, so will be perfect for that work because the other two greens will look perfectly on the shape. So on the areas will look like a mid kind of greens, and this one will be lighter because it's on the top. So think about that because it's something interesting. Sometimes you can play with not exactly the same color, but another kind of green, lighter, to paint in some places to represent something like that. So after this, I don't have too much to say. So this is the model. So the whole model was painted with the brush. If you could paint something like that, it's more than enough. But if you want something else, I'm going to bring you the airbrush to continue working on that. So again, thank you very much to be on the other side and see you in the next video tutorial. Bye bye.